Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I think we're still waiting some moments until all the participants have joined us virtually. The room is already quite full. And then I think in 1-2 minutes we can start this hybrid webinar. I see the numbers are going up. We're at around 80 participants now. I give everybody still a few seconds to join us, and when I see that the numbers are not increasing anymore, we can start. Yeah, I think the numbers look more or less stable now, so I'll start. And yeah, again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Lorenz Gross. I'm an economist and policy analyst at the OECD, at the Cities, Urban Policies and Sustainable Development Division. And I warmly welcome you all to this hybrid webinar. Today, we're going to launch the OECD report on a territorial approach to the SDGs that you can see here. Some housekeeping remarks to begin with. This event will be recorded and will be made available afterwards, so you can also have a second look online if you want to. And for those of you participating in this event online, we encourage you to use the Q&A function to ask questions throughout the webinar. And my colleagues will share with you some information in the chat on how to use the Q&A function. And today, this event will start with some opening remarks from representatives of the Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region and the head of the OECD Berlin Center, Nicola Brandt. And after the opening remarks, we'll have a presentation with the key findings and main recommendations of the report that I just showed you by Aziza Akmouche from the OECD, followed by a panel discussion, again with representatives from the Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region, the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the service agency Communities in One World. After that, we'll hear from some international peer reviewers and we'll then conclude with some final remarks. So let's now begin with the opening remarks by Stefan Dallinger, who is the chairman of the Rhine-Neckar Regional Association. Mr. Dallinger, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lawrence, for opening this session. It's again a great honor for us here in Mannheim to have you as our guests here in the Assembly Hall of the City of Mannheim or via internet, online, all over the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to warmly welcome you to the Metropolitan Region of Rhine-Neckar. As Lawrence told you, I'm the chairman of the Rhine-Neckar Regional Association, and very welcome to the beautiful Rhine-Neckar region. We're together for the next 19 minutes, and we started in the morning with a more regional and local focus, but now we have two more guests. I want to welcome, especially it's Aziza Akmouche, Head of Division Cities, Urban Policies and Sustainable Development Center of Entrepreneurship, SMIs, Regions and Cities of the OECD, and the head of the Berlin Center of the OECD, Nicola Brandt. Thank you for joining us this morning. Here in Rhine-Neckar, we are 2.4 million committed people that call Rhine-Neckar region as their home. The region is characterized by a unique mix of economic power, innovation, and joie de vivre. We have the largest continuous forest area in Germany, the Palatinat forest, 4 wine-growing regions, countless universities and research clusters, and with the Hambach Castle, one of the most important sites for democracy in Germany, but also in Europe. We often speak of our region as an alliance of strong partners. In the future, I believe we can broaden this alliance to include the other regions and municipalities, and of course, as the OECD team itself. We have come to know all of you as strong partners for our common goal of a sustainable and livable future. Many thanks to the team of the OECD, Aziza, Stefano, Lorenz, and the whole team for the trustful and pleasant cooperation, especially on behalf of our regional project team and the whole region. Once again, very warm welcome. Thank you for joining this morning with us.
Thank you, Mr. Dallinger. We'll now hear from Tilman Krauch, the chairman of the board of Zukunft Metropolregion Rhein-Neckar. Mr. Krauch, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everybody. This collaboration across levels of governance, many levels of governance, is particularly important to achieving the sustainable development goals in our region. My name is Tilman Krauch. I'm the chairman of the board of the association Zukunft Metropolregion Rhein-Neckar. I translate Future of the Metropolitan Region Rhein-Neckar. This is an association that aims to set a common course for our good future as a platform for dialogue between administration, business, science, and the civil society. The Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region lives multi-level governance. We are made up of 15 urban and rural districts at the interface of 3 federal states of Germany, namely Baden-Württemberg, Rhineland-Palatinate, and Hesse. We are a tri-state metropolitan area, hence the triangle in our logo. Networking, balancing opinions, and peer learning within our region, but also around 200 individual municipalities, is therefore top on our agenda. What we now want to look at together with the OECD is this wonderful project, a territorial approach to the SDGs. Where do we stand in comparison with other regions worldwide? What is being done differently there and here? How are suitable indicators collected? How are they weighted and comparably integrated into a monitoring system? The SDGs live from the work done on the ground and in the city, municipalities, and regions. But not every municipality and region has to reinvent everything if it is already being successfully implemented somewhere else. Together, we learn faster and better. I would like to echo my colleague Stefan Dallinger. An international alliance of strong partners for successful work with the SDGs is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Krauch. And lastly, for the opening remarks, we have the pleasure to welcome Nicola Brandt, the head of the OECD Berlin Center, and I'll give you the floor now.
Yes, guten Morgen to Mannheim and to the beautiful Rhine-Neckar region, which we've already heard it. Both natural beauty, cultural richness, innovation, economic power, and a strong democratic tradition and its symbols. And it also is a showcase, if you will, for the type of territorial approach to the sustainable development goals that we are going to present today, that my colleagues are going to present today, because as Mr. Krauch has pointed out, it is at the intersection of 3 Länder, and managing multi-level governance, learning from each other, peer learning is, so to speak, in the DNA of the region. And the testimony to this is the openness to undergo the exercise that we are going to discuss today, because with it's not the first report that my colleagues in Paris are doing with subnational governments, with cities, with regions on a territorial approach to the sustainable development goals. There are already 10 case studies that have been done, among them Cordoba in Argentina, Flanders in Belgium, and in fact, representatives of those 2 region cities will discuss with us today later. Kitakyushu in Japan has undergone such a study, Copa-Vogur, a municipality in Iceland, Paraná, the state in Brazil, and also the southern region of Denmark, in addition to the county of Viken in Norway. And of course, what we hope to bring to the table for the Rhine-Neckar region today is multi-level dialogues, experience with that, shared lessons, learning from each other. And I'm sure there will be a fruitful exchange today. So I think without further ado, I just want to thank the Rhine-Neckar region very much for opening the books, for working with my colleagues. I hear it has been a great pleasure, very enriching, and I'm sure that you as the Rhine-Neckar region can also give a lot of experience, advice, lessons from this exercise and from your multi-level governance experience, your strong efforts to implement the sustainable development goals at the regional level, which is very important. Because many of the elements of the sustainable development goals, housing, transport, infrastructure, land use, do of course have a strong regional dimension. So I'm very much looking forward to the discussions today. And thank you once again for being part of this in the name of the OECD.
Yes, thank you very much, Nicola. And as mentioned before, let us now turn towards the findings and recommendations of the report. So the core, so to speak, of the work. And yeah, our next speaker, Aziza Akmouche, who is the head of the Cities, Urban Policies and Sustainable Development Division at the OECD, will now, in the next 15 minutes, provide you with an overview of the findings of the project over the last 2 years, including the policy recommendations. So I'll hand over to Aziza.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Can you hear me well and can you see the slides?
Yes.
Brilliant, technology goes well. Thank you so much, and let me start by thanking our two chairmen online today, Stefan Dallinger and Tilman Kraus, for your participation, but also for the remarkable political commitment that at different scales in the Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region you've shown to this work. Nicola was just pointing out your readiness to open the books and to submit yourself to a third-party external view on how you are performing within the Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region. We know this is not easy, and this does require, for the report in particular, to be able to guide future decision-making. It does require a lot of political commitment. So thank you very much for joining us in this journey, and very delighted today to introduce to all of you, and especially our international stakeholders online, the findings and recommendations from this report that we are launching, as you can see on the slide, on a territorial approach to the Sustainable Development Goals in Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region. This is the result of a 2-year policy dialogue with over 200 stakeholders across levels of government from the public, private, and non-profit sectors. And I'd like to say the report is actually what matters the less. What is the most important is really the underlying work and consensus building and championship that has emerged from different conversations in the different seminars that we've had together. So I'll take you very briefly. Of course, this is not doing justice to the magnitude of the work, but to some of the highlights of this work and some of the recommendations we're extending to the region going forward. The first point that I would like to emphasize, and which is actually the very rationale why at the OECD we wanted to do a pilot case study on the Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region. And this is the fact that the region actually has set up a regional development strategy, which is called Vision 2025, that is backed by 11 fields of action, which you can see on the right side of the screen, that cover basically almost each of the 17 sustainable development goals, ranging from issues related to labor markets, health, education, mobility, energy, but also cross-cutting dimensions that have more to do with governance, as in the case of civic engagement, or innovation, culture, settlement, and spatial patterns. And this regional development strategy is basically aiming to position the Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region as one of the most attractive and competitive regions in Europe by 2025. And it is backed by a number of connected strategies that have to do with data, with sustainability monitoring, that are basically tackling specifically demographic change, and all these fields of actions that have dedicated sectoral strategies aim to advance sustainable development in the region. And the reason why this was extremely important for us is that at the OECD, we've long been advocating the fact that the SDGs should not be seen as a compliance agenda, especially when it comes to subnational governments, because the SDGs, as you know, the UN 2030 agenda, were designed primarily by and for national governments. And those are the ones that are held accountable for performance and progress every year. Where it does make a difference at subnational level is when local and regional governments are actually using them not as a compliance agenda per se, but as a policy tool, as a way to rethink from the ground up the way we design policies, we set up strategies, we prioritize investments, we allocate budgets, and the way we use the SDGs as a comprehensive, holistic framework that can tackle many of the trade-offs that are required when it comes to managing these different sectoral strategies. So we were really interested to see that many of these sustainability objectives were basically mainstreamed into that strategy of the Rhine-Neckar, even if measurement is, of course, something that is still ongoing and in progress. The second thing that was appealing in the case of Rhine-Neckar is that there is behind this strategy and the different fields of action some very concrete measures and projects. And I will name a few of them only just to give you a sense of how detailed and granular action is to advance these different fields of action. This mobility pact that was signed back in 2021 to address different regional transportation challenges, to make sure there would be joint development of innovative solutions that would account for all types of transport modalities, whether it's public, private, cycling, etc. And we'll come back to that, especially in the post-COVID era and what the post-COVID city may be. We found that extremely interesting. There's also these hydrogen mobility projects that you have, H2 River, H2 Rhine-Neckar, that are basically aiming to position the region as a front runner in sustainable mobility, to transform it into a hub for green hydrogen energy and to reduce CO2 emissions while doing so. And we'll see that this connects directly to the planet-related sustainable development goals. Education is, of course, attracting a lot your attention, as this is the case for many OECD countries these days in particular, and the education strategy that the region has developed for 2025 with over 200 stakeholders to position itself as a hub for education, to provide a tool for networking across education authorities and knowledge transfer, and to strengthen basically the development of what could be a future-proof skills in the territorial level is extremely interesting. And then we picked basically two projects that have to do with the digital revolution, which we know is one of the mega trends that many local and regional governments have to deal with these days, and that relate basically to the wires of public administration, whatever concerns cooperation. E-government in federal structures is extremely interesting for us to facilitate processes between business and public administrations and make sure they're simpler, they're faster, they're more cost effective, and that goes beyond the cutting red tape dimension that we all advocate for in our governments. And then more than this, the smart city, smart region ambition that Rhine-Neckar has stressed over the past years, and that made it basically one of the 28 cities, regions selected for a project funded by the Federal Ministry of the Interior and to transition towards this smart city model, where maybe the technology is not seen as an end per se, but as a means to an end to put people back at the center of what decision making and well-being may be. Now, when it comes, and that's a full chapter in the report, to a very schematic view at what is quite a strength and quite an area of improvement for the region. And of course, there's a lot more details in the report. We could say, to cut a long story short, that there are many challenges and opportunities, many strengths also when it comes to the metro region, where a number of SDGs are higher than in OECD regions average. And this is the case for SDG 3, that has to do with good health and well-being, 8, decent work and economic growth, and 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure. But there are, as is often the case in large territories, a number of territorial disparities, in particular between rural and urban areas, for what relates to job opportunities, education, and mobility. And if we had to actually single out one main sustainable development goal where we see much room for improvement, it's SDG 12 on the circular economy, responsible consumption and production. And I'll say a few words about that. Now, taking each of the P's of the agenda and looking at people in particular, we were interested to see that health is one of the region's core strengths, with very strong performance actually in many of the health related indicators under SDG 3. What you can see on the right side for the graph with the red bar is actually the Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region performance. And then you can see the spreads for almost all OECD countries between the best performing region and the less performing region. And you can see that when it comes in this case, for hospital beds rate, the region is actually ranking higher than the OECD average. It's actually the same when it comes to life expectancy, 2 years above OECD average, and when it comes to low infant mortality rate as well. We see a gap, gender gap in employment that is slightly below the average of the OECD regions when it comes to SDG 5 for the Rhine-Neckar Metro region, even if, of course, despite a relatively low unemployment rate, long-term unemployment remains a challenge for the region, and part-time unemployment is also a significant challenge that is common to the region. When it comes to the planet, I was mentioning earlier SDG 11, responsible consumption and production. Here are some of the data that you can find in the report. Municipal waste rate per capita, which is more than 17% higher than the OECD average, and quite some distance to travel for the region to reach the end value that is set under the corresponding targets. There's and you all know that, and that's maybe a feature for Germany, overall quite a high car dependency rate that is of course a challenge for the metropolitan region. And there's motorized individual transportation, which is the most common means of transport that accounts for almost 60% of the modal split and 73% of transport volumes. Now, this car dependency, of course, in these days of high dependence on fossil fuel energies and high rising costs, basically, of related energies, is having a direct consequence in terms of the cost of living for urban and rural dwellers in particular, especially in areas where you don't necessarily have an alternative, credible alternative to the car, which can not only be walking or cycling. I think the conversation around the broader menu of options, in particular public transportation, and how public transportation can be strengthened also to better connect cities of different sizes, is the basic requisite, I would say, for a more polycentric and quality urbanization. Under the indicator of prosperity, we see low unemployment, high R&D expenditure, and disposable income. I was making a reference to the unemployment rate earlier, which is less than half the OECD average, and youth unemployment, which these days in particular is important, is also among the lowest 10% of OECD regions. R&D expenditure that account for more than 4% of gross regional product compared to 1.6 in the OECD region, and disposable household income, which is exceeding OECD average by more than $4,500 that links to the SDG 10. And again, you can see when it comes to the unemployment rate in particular, which we've picked for the graph, where Rhine-Neckar is positioned compared to the other OECD region. Now, when it comes to the last P on peace and partnerships, a few things that are worth noticing. The first one is a rather high voter turnout in the metropolitan region federal elections, which is slightly higher than Germany overall and slightly above OECD average. This is particularly important these days of what we call geography of discontent or mistrust of citizens vis-à-vis their governments and the capacity of their governments to ensure their well-being and deliver their basic services. Some of the data we've been producing at the OECD shows, interestingly, that the more you go local, the higher the level of trust. And I think that's something that would characterize Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region, but many mayors and regional level politicians vis-a-vis or compared, let's say, to national governments. And that's quite a very good indicator in terms of the civic engagement at a given place. Almost 9 out of 10 households, and surprising for an OECD country in the metropolitan region, that have access to broadband internet, and this is definitely among the 25% top 25% of OECD regions. Broadband internet, which you will recall is used as one of the indicators to appraise, of course, not entirely satisfactory, but a start SDG 17 on partnerships, and this idea that the more people are connected, the more exchanges can actually happen. Now, of course, as is the case in many large territories, and in this case, you said it rightly, that span across 3 different states, have over 200 and close to 290 municipalities, 2.4 million people, as you said, is the issue of multi-level governance. And with the issue of multi-level governance comes, of course, the issue of multi-level financing. You can have the best strategy designed. If we don't have the means of implementation, this will stay academic. And what is interesting is that there are a number of allocations of roles and responsibilities within the metropolitan region for many of the SDGs related activities across municipalities, across districts, and even these 11 fields of actions that are scattered across the 3 different states in terms of the accountability for implementation. But there's no real formal coordination mechanism between the metropolitan region and the federal state on these issues of sustainable development, which could sometimes hinder, you know, the ambition, let's say, that is behind the Vision 2025. And when it comes to implementation in particular, of course, the typical obstacles that relate to state level funding across the entire metropolitan region being basically challenged is very important. Shaping a vision that cuts across administrative boundaries is sometimes extremely challenging, but implementing it also implies leveraging the implementation tools around that functional approach, which is based on where people actually work and live, and that in this case spans across the 3 states, which is not always easy when we go to the wires, the budgetary wires of our respective administrative units. The last point I wanted to share in the findings before moving to the recommendation and keeping an eye on the time is the active civil society landscape and the work that is quite significant and ongoing with global companies. We heard in the introduction, you know, the economic powerhouse ambition of the metro region, a large presence of automotive industry, but not only the bioeconomy sector, which is also subject to a number of projects projects. And it's quite interesting to see, and that's a trend we've observed in many OECD countries, that many CSOs have actually already integrated the SDGs in their core work. That you have also a culture, what Nicola was referring to as a democratic culture of participation and different types of mechanisms. The Volunteer Day is one of them, to raise awareness of your citizens on the importance of civic engagement for the SDGs and broaden the base, let's say, of those in charge of making them happen. We've seen also that large companies are increasingly integrating sustainability targets into their business strategies, not necessarily as in the old-fashioned way of corporate social responsibility, but really mainstreaming, let's say, this thinking, this systemic thinking in their business models, supply chains, and guiding somehow their strategic orientations for the years to come. And there is, as is always the case, a lower awareness on that front from SMEs that, of course, tend in Germany, but in many countries, I have to say, to see the SDGs as a burden or extra work rather than a tool through which they could maybe make synergies and better manage some of the tensions or trade-offs in their daily operations. So maybe knowing that the SMEs are the backbone of the economy, that it's the 99% basically of companies that we have, and that are essential for the local ecosystem that is underlying the economic development of the region, probably an area that deserves attention in the future. Now, I conclude with this slide. I'm not going to spell it out in details. You have at the end of the report a full section on policy recommendations that comes with an action plan for each of these recommendations, and that really sets out, let's say, short, medium, and long-term goals and champions that can drive some of these goals. But basically, a first recommendation, which is really about leveraging more the SDGs to strengthen the policies that can address some of the sustainable development challenges that we scan through, and of course keeping in mind the big trends of, you know, climate change, demographic pressure, but also the digital revolution and globalization and its discontent when doing so, to make sure the region stays fit for the future. A holistic strategy maybe that can underpin the more effective implementation of the SDGs across administrative boundaries is something you may wish to think of, and we've provided some examples here of how this is done elsewhere. Advancing regional disparities or bridging some of these regional disparities through the SDGs is a third recommendation. Strengthening coordination between the region and the 3 federal states is in particular on funding a dedicated recommendation. There's some guidance that is also provided under recommendation 5 to integrate the SDGs into the very budgeting process at the municipal level, and to set the right incentives for public procurement to drive sustainable development patterns, and a number of good practices can guide you on that front. The recommendation may be to upscale the profile of this metropolitan atlas that is very interesting and that you've developed by including this interactive SDG dashboard with an integrated indicator framework that can contribute basically to shed light and transparency on how the region is performing, compare it with other regions in Germany or even globally, and trigger conversations in different parts of the society. There's a recommendation on a civil society forum. There's actually a momentum now to reach a critical scale with the different CSOs that you've been working with, and a recommendation that is dedicated to how one can facilitate the engagement of private sector at large, SMEs in particular, and maybe creating a sustainable development platform can help you connect the dots. So I stop here. It's been 15 minutes. I'd like to close by, of course, thanking the local team, which has been really a joy to work with. I'd like to name very quickly Laura, Boris, Kirsten, and Christine, Of course, our champions from Germany, whether we're talking about BMZ with Daphne or Sebastian from Engagement Global and One World now, our two chairmen, Stefan Dallinger and Tilman Krauch, of course, the mayors of the different cities and Mayor Kurz in particular, who sits in the OECD champion Mayors Initiative, and my great OECD team, which is led by Stefano. It's a big day for them today. The 10th case study is something. Stefano, Lawrence, Aline, and all of you, congratulations. We can all be very proud.
Thank you very much, Aziza, for this comprehensive overview. A lot of information to digest for everybody. But of course, the report is now also available online in case you need further clarification or want to read further details. And with that, I think we can now continue with the panel discussion to also discuss some of the aspects that have been raised in Aziza's presentation. And the panel discussion today we have with Mr. Dallinger and Mr. Krauch, from whom you've already heard, as well as Daphne Groß-Janssen from the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany, and Sebastian Ohlmeier from the Service Agency Communities in One World. And following a first round of interventions, we hope to also hear from the participants online. As mentioned before, you feel free to share your questions in the Q&A. We have about 150 participants connected online, so I think it's a very good number. And moving forward, I will start with Tilman Krauch, and I would like to know from you what you think is the value added of the assessment and the recommendation of the report, in particular for the engagement of civil society and private sector, which is really the focus of the work of your institution.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we are all overwhelmed by the comprehensiveness of the nature of this report. It looks into so many different aspects and fields, and we all typically look into specific aspects and fields that matter to us. So this report is much more comprehensive than what we have looked into so far. And I like that a lot. A couple of things, of course, have been reconfirmed, and we are happy to see that: the strength of the economic basis, the labor market, the value created in the region, good jobs, small, innovative, medium-sized, small, but also large innovative companies, high R&D quota. We saw this 4% versus 1.6, a fantastic number. And I think with that, we have everything at our hands to solve the problems which have been mentioned. And I think that's the good thing. We are a powerful tri-state area, and I think we have enough ideas how to solve the problem. So that's the very positive side. The other thing which is close to our hearts here in the metropolitan area, because that's really the way we are, is we like to do things together. There is a very strong spirit of easy communication, collaboration across borders. That's typical for us. We always are also characterized from the outside as an area of, let's say, down-to-earth people which just look at the problems and come up with ideas across all sorts of different institutions and, as we heard, even the state. So that, I think, is a very strong hint out of the report that we have to use this power and that we have to engage our civil and societal tools that we already have. The volunteer day was mentioned. There's many other areas which work in that way. And I think that allows us then to bring the right sense of urgency behind the OECD tool targets, because that's important, to take everybody along across all, let's say, interest groups, of course, across all political parties, but also across all age groups, because we are all in it, and that means everybody. And with that, we have to get everybody's attention and everybody's sense and willingness to cooperate. And that's something that I took out of this report, which will be very helpful for us here in the future.
Thank you very much. I think this collaboration aspect is that you mentioned is very important, and it also links to the next question that we have for Daphne Groß-Janssen from the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, and this is a question about the aspect of multi-level governance and collaboration, and the idea or the question of what you would see as the challenges and opportunities in this metropolitan regions for multi-level governance, considering it spans different states and different regions from different states.
Thank you very much for this important question. I think that first and foremost, this kind of collaboration is a very important chance of moving forward. The Federal Constitutional Court ruled that we as the political decision makers needed to take decisions now, today, strong decisions that would ensure future generations in Germany can also decide freely on how to balance their needs, how to realize their needs and wants. And we can only do that if all levels of government interact. This is why a report such as this one on the metropolitan region is so important for future policy making, because it shows how urgent it is for us to address how we can interact, how we can exchange, which levels of government need to be strengthened and need to talk to each other. It will be difficult to implement your recommendations precisely because it's a tri-state area, but you have a good tool now to address your federal state governments, as we have a tool from the federal level to address the 16 federal states on their need to cooperate, because you're a strong cross-border region, tri-state area. You can do a lot. You have the economic ability, so you can show the way forward. And also, being a strong and attractive metropolitan area, you have the opportunity to invest in peer learning within Germany, internationally. Though it's easier with the cities from the global north, you're also investing in peer exchange with regions and cities from the global south. And that will give you strong opportunities to find solutions, to learn from each other, and to take those practical solutions back to the political sphere, and again emphasize why we need to have good coordination across all levels of government, showing how what solutions can be made possible when coordination works.
Thank you very much. I will now hand over to Sebastian Ohlmeier from the service agency Communities in One World, that also plays a very important role in this whole multi-level governance framework, especially as a supporter for municipalities working on the localization of the SDGs. And my question for you would be what you see first of all, as the challenges and opportunities for municipalities in the region to move forward with the localization of the SDGs, and then also how your institution, Engagement Global, or the service agency Communities in One World, can help them moving forward with the localization of the SDGs.
Yeah, Lawrence Gross, thank you very much for this question, and congratulations for this great report. We are really looking forward to read it. And yeah, concerning your question, it's a tough question because the municipalities here in the metropolitan region of Rhine-Neckar, they are already really engaged. Most of them know what the SDGs are. Most of them know how sustainable development is working on a project level, meaning one project here and one project there, but mostly the challenges are defined in those connecting these projects to get a bigger picture and to know what impact are we having with this kind of project, or is this whole package of multiple projects. So we have to look into this, and this challenge is addressed by multiple actions. The first one is how to convince my colleagues in my administration on systematically work with the SDGs. It's a really tough work. And we try at the service agency communities in One World to help the municipalities in Germany and all over Germany, in the east, the source, all directions, but also here in this region, to give them the support they need in order to manage the different steps there are in right now. Maybe some municipalities don't know right now how to work with the SDGs or to understand them not as a compliance agenda. That was really important of Aziza to mention. It's more or less a tool, a method for municipalities to deal with sustainability development and to incorporate global responsibility. And that thing I mentioned earlier, to convince colleagues, because this is the metropolitan level here. This is not the administration of a municipality, and a sustainable strategy at its core is done in the municipal administration. So we can try to help them and try to give the support they need by giving data, by giving the dashboard. This is a great support. But in fact, the work itself is done at the administration, and that is kind of difficult for many people to communicate the SDGs and to know what it's done, what tasks are behind it. And that's not very much work. That it's done. It's doable, as we say often. So this is what we do. We check on which is the state right now in the municipality. Are they at the field of monitoring, or are they at the beginning? And we try to help them in order to address those challenges. And hope they localize the SDGs and know how to get connected with all the other municipalities that maybe struggle with the same questions. And we are happy to do this. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, very, very important work, and very important to convince other municipalities and raise awareness of the topic, first of all, and convince colleagues to further work on that topic. The last speaker in the first round of questions is Stefan Dallinger. And from you, I would also like to hear a bit what your key takeaways are from the report, from the work with the OECD, and also how you think you can use those takeaways in the further work in the future on this topic.
Yeah, thank you for the question. What I want to say first, there's nothing really new I heard today. We knew all this, but we never had it as focused under the headline of the SDGs as today. And therefore, this is very helpful, this report, not only to develop the region as we heard, but to develop it with more sustainability. And I want to make one example. When we heard from the report that we are very strong in health, it's not only good for the people living here in this area to have the hospitals, to have the doctors, to know you live in a safe region, as we have shown during Corona in this region. But it's also the change to go the next steps. For example, we have founded a legal entity, a Health and Life Science Alliance. And the next step will be how to create spin-offs and startups in this health microcosmos. Then we have good education. We have good jobs. We have to think about how to organize public transport, and so on, so on. And therefore, this is the really new thing, not only to make projects, but to think about what does each project means depending on the SDGs. And therefore, I want to thank you, not only for the report, but going this way with us and staying with us together, because now the discussion will start. It's not ended today. It starts. It's how to, as you said, as we've seen in the recommendations, make a holistic sustainability strategy. Is it one overarching thing? Or is it within every project we think about? So there, I want to discuss this with all of the partners, with the team, and therefore thank you, the team, but everybody who took part in this way, in the interviews, being a peer or going the way coming up next for us.
Thank you very much. And I see we have some interesting question also from the audience. And there is one that I think could be targeted towards Daphne Gross-Janssen. It's especially about the aspect that you mentioned, also the collaboration with the Global South. And one of the questions we see in the chat is what also the challenges are when applying this approach to some cities in developing countries, the localization of the SDGs, and also adding to this question, what role can then the collaboration between cities in the global north and the global south play for the localization of the SDGs?
That is, it's an interesting question, as in, I think the cities from the global north are not as good, not as well prepared as cities from the global south. That is because in the global south, we do have a long-standing tradition of drawing up development strategies based on different kinds of what development meant at that point in time. So they have good practice examples on what sustainability strategies could look like. What they lack oftentimes is what the Rhine-Neckar region has in access. It's strong economically. So many times what they need is access to financial resources. That's very much easier here. And then, of course, the challenges each city has to address is different, where some need to create good jobs. The Rhine-Neckar region probably needs to spell out what limits to growth means in terms of decarbonizing local economies, knowing that they still need the income in order to be an attractive, livable region. So exchange, peer-to-peer exchange between municipalities in the global north and the global south can help address problems that are similar. I strongly believe that cities like Frankfurt or Mannheim can learn a lot from cities in the global south in terms of how do we adapt to changing climate, because we are going to experience the climate that cities farther south have now. How do we avoid heat islands? What does this mean to our local health system? What kind of diseases are we going to face? And cities from the global south might be able to learn a lot on how integrated public transport systems are supposed to work, because that's a weakness in many southern cities. There is no public transport available to everybody. There is no social dimension to public transport. Who has a car is mobile, who has not faces sometimes forbidding prices in order to use a bus. So they need to stay within a small radius in order to earn their income. And that is why it's worthwhile to invest in South-North exchange on the municipal level.
Thank you very much. Another interesting question from the audience is a question that I would like to ask Sebastian Ohlmeier from Engagement Global. And this question is if there are any factors which make certain rural municipalities or municipalities in general not implement the SDGs. What are the main burdens for municipalities? Why are there still municipalities that do not implement the SDGs except for awareness?
Yeah, thank you. When you talk about rural municipalities, most of them typically have a much smaller administration, and they depend on other organizational units to get the overall view of the SDGs. So sometimes when we work with municipalities that are under inhabitants of 5,000 or maybe just a few hundred, then we take a whole different approach. We don't say get all the SDGs. So we are just more focusing on what can be done. And I wouldn't say that they face more challenges maybe in order to fulfill all the SDGs, but when it comes to get connected with their population. I think they have some major what you call it pros. So when they invite the inhabitants of their village, maybe much more people are coming in relation to like a bigger city that has a open council about certain topics. So this is an advantage that we have to build on. But yeah, they don't have the organizational units. They are there, but they have to communicate with them. And I told earlier, this is a really tough task for them to convince everybody. And in this sense, it is great to look on another level, maybe like a regional level, in order to get more stakeholders involved, to get a network built up. And yeah, this is one reason the rural area is a little bit difficult in order to get all the SDGs done. But on the other hand, there's also the data. You have much detailed, granular data that is on the city level as on in the rural area, but that's still not a reason to to work with the rural area. Much more a reason to get more done, to get also the data perspective in this rural area, and to try to get new approaches to know where the SDGs are and where we are standing. Yes, and there are a lot of examples also from villages, smaller villages that engage with the Global South. So this is not a task or a work that is only done by bigger cities. We have a lot of smaller municipalities that have strong collaborations with the Global South, depending on the different of the project. So yeah, it's there are many pictures in this question, but yeah, it's difficult. You have to have a new perspective when you work with different municipalities with a different size. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But generally good to see that municipalities of all sizes can work on the SDGs. They just need different approaches. So I think that's a very, very important point. We have one more question from the audience that I would like to ask Aziza. And that question is on the SDGs as a top-down approach, actually, and as a potential constraint to innovation initiatives as they need to be framed according to the SDGs. And the question would be, or that we've seen here in the Q&A, is how this top-down directionality of the SDGs could also possibly hamper local innovative initiatives that are more a bottom-up approach. Aziza?
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Indeed, that's a very good point, because on the one hand, we insist that the SDGs should be inspirational. They should basically provide food for thought and ideas to put people around the table, to pool resources and budget in a certain direction, to identify, challenges or bottlenecks to reaching a given vision or strategy. And on the other hand, there is an expectation that those targets be met by 2030, again, by national governments primarily, but going into the details, we've seen at the OECD that 65% of the 169 targets that are behind the 17 Sustainable Development Goals cannot be met without local and regional governments, because they have to do with either core policy prerogatives that are managed at the local level, or they have to do with core investment or spending that is discharged at the local level. So I think my tip here, and the philosophy that we've been trying to convey to OECD countries, is that they should be used as a framework. Of course, all the mayors that we meet on a regular basis at the OECD don't wake up in the morning, even the best champion of the champions, saying, I want to implement the SDGs. I mean, nobody does that. But the mayors, they wake up in the morning saying, I need to fix the energy affordability issue because of the rising costs and the cost of living these days. I need to fix my traffic jam and congestion issues because of the car dependency and lack of affordable transport. I need to fix my housing and housing affordability, supply, but also revisiting housing in light of what we've learned from this pandemic and the need for more multifunctional, multi-purpose infrastructure, given the constraints on the built environment. And all these issues, they have to do with dedicated SDGs. So our tip is, don't approach the SDG as an extra commitment that is a top-down one that has to be achieved, but just scan through them as a way to identify the very core pressing issues that you have to deal with at the subnational level and try to see to what extent they can be valuable in framing the conversation with the different stakeholders, public, private, non-profit sectors, that you need on board to achieve those objectives. So that's what we mean by using them as a policy tool that by definition is bottom up and comes from the initiatives that can be taken either by the city or region government itself or by the civil society, the private sector, and all the local system nearby. It's really a framework that can help identify, understand the connectedness between different issues that have to be dealt with at the local level and that otherwise may appear as a pure aggregation of sectoral initiatives and priorities when they are all actually connected to what drives well-being for people, but also attractiveness of a given region to people, to firms, and to visitors at large.
Thank you very much. Very important point indeed. And we have one short last intervention by Tilman Krauch, who wanted to respond to the same question.
Yeah, the question whether the overall approach is hampering R&D. I would say in the contrary. It is supporting R&D. Let's not forget that the UN definition of 1987 is still the basis of all we discuss, and it talks about balancing our needs. Balancing of needs means technologies, because we balance our needs with the help of technologies. And then it says that in the future, generations should be able to balance their needs. That's different balancing and different technologies. So from today to future generations balancing of needs, we talk technology changes. And therefore, at the core of the solutions to many of the topics that we tried to tackle, R&D, innovation, and changing technologies and using new technologies, better, efficient, better energy and resource efficient technologies is really what we all strive for. And therefore, I think it is supporting R&D and innovation.
Thank you very much. With that, we're actually right on time. The 30 minutes for the panel discussion, unfortunately, already over, and we will then now go to the next item of the agenda. I thank you everybody who participated in this panel very much. And as a next step, we have the opportunity, as already mentioned before, to hear from two international peer reviewers. We'll hear from the province of Cordoba in Argentina and also from the region of Flanders in Belgium, who already participated in the second mission last year here in April. And they will kind of compare their own experience with the localization of the SDGs to the approach in the Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region. And we start with Ine Battens from the government of Flanders in Belgium. Ine, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It has been very interesting so far. And I think I will continue on a few points that were raised by the previous panel. I was asked to give a little bit about policy coherence. And a very interesting question I heard is, do we go for a holistic strategy or do we go for streamlining? And I do believe that the answer would be both. And Flanders also, we have both, but I'll be very frank with you and tell you a little bit about what we are doing right and what we're doing not well enough. And that will be, first we have our holistic strategy, our Vision 2050, which is the overarching policy for all of our policy in Flanders. However, we do notice that it's not being used as such properly. So I can say that we are not doing well enough in that aspect. As for streamlining, we also have our Focus 2030, which has the SDG translated particularly towards our situation in Flanders, which is also being monitored quite well on level of indicators. But we do notice that it's not really a living document, which means that both on the level of politicians and administration, it's not really being familiarized. It's not really something that you encounter in many policy documents. On the other hand, what we do quite well is our governance, in the sense that we use transition governments. It includes systemic thinking, long-term thinking, moving from long-term visions towards medium and short-term goals. It means co-creating with our stakeholders. So both policy is being co-created, implementation is being done together with stakeholders. All of this might be very interesting for you as well, as I see that you're starting your dialogues with civil society. So it might be interesting to see what's happening on our side with this. And also we make quite a lot of effort in supporting businesses, especially when it comes to the new EU regulations. There's work on do no significant harm, on corporate sustainable reporting, on due diligence, because we do notice there's a very large package coming towards large businesses and SMEs, and they're not really fully equipped to deal with this. So we are very much focusing on supporting with this, which brings me to the next point, multi-level governance. Also here, I'll get into the things that we do well and things we don't do very well. We do have quite some coordinating bodies. We have the Interministerial Conference for Sustainable Development. It works well in the sense that we are making a voluntary national review together. The regional governments and the federal government in Belgium are at the same level. So it takes a lot of coordination to make sure that we see eye to eye and that everybody has enough space to input their own policy. We're also sharing a lot of instruments, which means that if one government develops an instrument, we will share it with all the others. So those elements are going quite well. When it comes to structural discussions on budgeting and such, we still have a lot of room to grow. We do notice that there's some disparities and we're not seeing eye to eye on everything on this. I think those are the main points. If there's any specific questions, I'll be happy to get into that. Just one last point, also going back towards one of the points made during the previous panel. I heard a lot about technological innovation. And in Flanders, we also, we're very much into technological innovation, of course. We have the Flanders Technology and Innovation initiatives, but also there's a lot of focus on social innovation, how to cooperate, how to think together, how to change society and prepare us for the future that is to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ine. Very interesting comparison also in terms of the innovation, the topic of innovation with the metropolitan region Rhine-Neckar. We'll now hand over to Melissa Gorondi-Novak from the province of Cordoba. She's the Director General for Articulation and International Relations and will share the insights and similarities and differences in the approach of the province of Cordoba with the metropolitan region Rhine-Neckar. Melissa, please, you have the floor.
Thank you all very much. Good morning, good afternoon. Here in Argentina, we are very early. It is a pleasure to be at the launch of the OECD report on a territorial approach to the SDGs in Rhine-Neckar on behalf of the province of Cordoba. I was at the launch of the project and I'm really grateful to be hearing the results of this territorialization process. So congratulations to Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region. And thank you very much for the invitation to share an experience from the Global South, from the region of Latin America. So I will share some key elements on the first recommendation that was made from OECD to Rhine-Neckar on how to use SDGs to implement public policies in a manner that includes different actors that are part of the government and also non-governmental actors. So the province of Cordoba has been in Argentina a pioneer in relation to sustainable development since 2016 when we started our commitment with the agenda. And this leadership has been the result of a journey that began with the alignment of our political actions towards the 2030 agenda, but then continuing with a collaborative process of territorialization and involving also the development of our own statistical procedures in order to measure the achievement of our prioritized sustainable development goals. But the key has been Cordoba's experience using the agenda as a tool to create new policies of transition. So in that sense, the SDGs have guided the construction of a new economic matrix focused on economy of knowledge, green industries, and the promotion of clusters based on the reduction of digital gap and the generation of labor opportunities for women and for diversities. Also oriented to the developing of an education for new and circular economies, and the generation of energy transition processes based on renewable resources. And I would like to remark, and this was discussed previously with a question that was made, that these commitments become a real challenge for a subnational government that is located in the region of the world, which is the Global South, which is Latin America, whose main problems are related to multidimensional poverty and structural inequalities. So in that sense, Cordoba is using SDGs to create new policies and invest in structural transformations to give response to main serious problems, which are the social ones. But we are doing this through creating new jobs and sustainable economy opportunities for everyone. And which are the key main aspects of this use of SDGs to promote synergies between policy areas and to create new policy agendas? First of all, after the conclusions and the recommendations, as Rhine-Neckar is now hearing from OECD, we heard and we received these recommendations in 2020 at the end of the pilot of SDG territorialization. The province of Cordoba started a new project in 2022 in order to implement 4 strategy axes. One is the expansion of employment opportunities for women. The second is the reduction of digital gap in all its dimensions, not only related to infrastructure, but also with digital inclusion. The third one is the expansion of access to housing and well-being of the inhabitants in our subnational government. And the fourth is strengthening the education for future jobs. We are conducting this project nowadays. which is entitled Advancing the Strategy Priorities of the Province of Córdoba throughout the SDGs. And it involves the participation of relevant political ministries and non-governmental stakeholders, such as the civil society, the academia, and the private sector. So the final objective is to create public policies, new public policies to the 2030 agenda. And we started identifying main challenges and problems faced by the province within the framework of the defined 4 axes, then strengthen interministerial articulation to coordinate efforts among internal actors and include non-governmental actors, in that sense, promoting multi-stakeholder governance. And 4 key tools that has helped us in this process and are helping us in this process. One is data. Our model is based on own data. Córdoba has developed a well-being survey with the help of OECD, and we try to understand or to have a comprehensive look of this multidimensional poverty and the well-being of our citizens. So we are measuring indicators, a set of indicators in 12 dimensions in 4 main agglomerates, which are more or less 50% of the population in the province. The second tool is the use of technology that was already mentioned to define policies. An example is the single citizen base. This base is an integrated set of data from administrative records, which are originated in different dependencies of the executive power. And this interoperate system guides us in the implementation of properly focused government actions and to focus on critical situations that need to be addressed by the public policy. A third tool, as I mentioned, is the multi-level and multi-actor governance in the different dimensions, the vertical ones with the international organizations such as OECD, United Nations, with the national government, we are part of this federal forum in which we share with other provinces, in the horizontal way also with other provinces that we are creating new policies, for example, related to sustainable energies. And also, which is the most important and the most challenge, articulation with our municipalities. We have more than 400 municipalities and we are the most municipalized province in the whole country. And of course, the dimension that involves which we consider the synergy, which involves different actors that are part of our society. And finally, and the 5th tool or key element in this process of making policies using the SDGs is the budget. In 2020, in the pandemic, we encourage the different actors that are part of the government to start aligning their budgets in order to identify how we are working financially to achieve the SDGs. So these are some of the main tools that can help Rhine-Neckar in order to achieve new policies, new lines of actions using SDGs. Thank you very much for the invitation again. Please count with the province of Córdoba to continue sharing experiences, learnings, and especially in this decade, which is the decade of action, which encourage us as governments to work deepen in order to achieve sustainable development, not only because 2030 is very close in time, but also because our communities need us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for all these tools that you've shared with us. And also for waking up quite early to be here with us today. We have about 5 minutes for questions to the 2 peer reviewers. If I look around in the room, I would like to see if there is anybody who has some questions or also online. Yes, I see somebody in the audience, please. If you could just briefly present yourself and tell us what question you have for the peer reviewers. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lorenz. My name is Laura and I'm working at the Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region. So Thank you, dear peer reviewers, for these interesting results. And I just have one question, because I'm very interested in the differences and maybe similarities between the Rhine-Neckar region, which is like the first metropolitan region that participated in the OECD process, and compared to you and the other participants from the OECD project. Maybe a question to both of you.
Maybe we start with Ine.
It's a difficult question. There's, of course, a lot of similarities. We also have very similar priorities that we strive for. I think differences would be governance. I think that the transition approach would be a little bit different. But otherwise, I think there's a lot of similarities between our processes, for sure.
Thank you very much. Melissa, if you have any final thoughts about similarities and differences in the approaches between the metropolitan region, Rhine-Neckar, and Cordoba?
I will agree with Ine. I think this search for multi-level governance and multi-stakeholder articulation is some similar experience that we shared. Also, the involvement with the agenda and using the agenda to create new axes of actions is not only a tool for communication, it's a tool for the management of our government. I think that's another point that we all that are part of this process of territorialization with OECD shared. And also there are some differences that came from the position of our regions and cities and our challenges that we are facing nowadays, as I said before.
Thank you very much. If I look around, if there are any more questions that we could squeeze in for 1 or 2 minutes. Yes, I see one question from the audience. Please, again, it would be great if you could present yourself and then quickly ask your question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Christian Hübel from the city of Mannheim, and I found this peer-to-peer review very helpful for us to be reviewed by experts, international experts, and to discuss with them our opportunities and challenges on several topics. And I was asking myself, perhaps subsequently, we can have this also on other topics, and whether you or other people of the network or peers are interested in this, to have a peer-to-peer review once a year about topics about health or civic engagement or other things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking around if anybody wants to react to this, or if the peer reviewers might also be interested in further collaboration on other topics in this regard. Ine and Melissa.
Yes, I saw there's already some collaboration in the report. And I think it's always interesting to compare and because there's so many similarities in our priorities and in our challenges. I think we can very much learn from each other, for sure.
Good. Mr. Tillmann-Krauch with some final remarks.
Very, very short comment. I mean, obviously, if we go into the process and create data and KPIs and monitor that, the question arises, how do we discuss that from time to time and with whom? On the company side, you typically have the owners that come together in the general meeting, for example, and then you discuss it there. But there is no owners of a metropolitan area, and we cannot simply put it to vote. Yeah, so it's really a good question. How can that be brought to the public and then get feedback and hopefully further support from there? It's a great question. It's open to me.
Thank you very much. Stefan Dallinger.
Yeah, as I said, we are open for the discussion and open for peer reports, of course, but we also have to focus what is not similar to the other regions, what is different. And this Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region, it's not a governance, it's not administration, it's a political project, bring people together in this region. And therefore we have to focus who is the decision maker, who can at the end make the decision to bring a project to a goal. And if it's helpful for us in the region to have a peer reporting, have a peer-to-peer, it's open, but we have to check very, very certainly if it helps us, or if we only make a discussion and nothing happens.
Great, thank you so much. So with that, I conclude this peer review panel, and yeah, invite everybody now to move on to the conclusion of our event. And for that, I would like to hand over first to Peter Johann, who is the Managing Director of the Metropolregion Rhine-Neckar GmbH, who will provide some concluding remarks, followed by Ralf Schlusche, who is the Managing Director of the Rhine-Neckar Regional Association. So I see the two of them are going together. So I hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. I hope that you don't expect any final conclusions now after this lot of stuff that we got this German morning here. You just mentioned my name. My name is Peter Johann. I'm heading our entity for regional development activities, especially linked to economic topics or subjects. And first of all, I would really like to thank a lot for this terrific work, which has been done and concluded in a great analysis and report, as well as for the presentations this morning. Now the results are on the table, Ralf, and it's on us to make the best out of it. Stefan, I liked a lot what you said, that not everything was new, what we heard this morning, but it was a condensed version of where we stand. And also, let's say, the relative positioning to others, which made it highly interesting. And of course, the recommendations, quite a lot. We have to now think on this. And this is why I said it's not a final remark from our side or a conclusion. As Kirsten Korte, who cannot be with us this morning, Ralf Schlusche and myself will have to take over the responsibility for the evaluation of the report, of course. This is the first. The second is then the implementation of the recommendations wherever seen as appropriate. As you can imagine, how we would like to start is to go into detail, to analyze the topics as a first step, and then plan our next steps diligently. In my opinion, and Tilman mentioned it, as we are down-to-earth people working together with others, this includes a close dialogue also with our natural partners, as, for example, chambers of commerce, of industry, for example, and your recommendation to reinforce, for example, the support of small and medium-sized companies by providing them with more knowledge and expertise can only be leveraged with our partners and in the dialogue with these partners of the region. And by the way, and by coincidence, the Rhine-Neckar Chamber of Commerce and Industry is running an event on exactly that topic of SMEs and sustainability. That session will take place in the so-called climate arena in a couple of weeks and might serve as an ideal starting point for that specific recommendation. Furthermore, our evergreen topic that we have in the region, and especially also I can imagine in other regions, of recruiting and retaining skilled workers, is also well linked to that recommendation and underscores the attractiveness of the Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region. All in all, one key takeaway for us, for me, is that we probably should connect our strategies even tighter with the SDGs, meaning that when updating an existing strategy for our action fields or setting up a new one, we might have to incorporate the SDGs and define targets and KPIs on the foundation of the SDGs. Then make it happen with our hands-on mentality, and whether we then also need an overarching strategy as a sustainability strategy, we would have to see and to discuss whether this makes sense in our case. And we are not starting from scratch here, as we have already piloted this in the context of the recently issued Smart Region strategy, which I can imagine this might serve also as a sound blueprint. Well, now I really see some great impulses that we get from the study, and therefore thanks again to all who made it happen. And with this, Ralf, I would like to hand over to you for your first initial thoughts, and probably you have also conclusions.
Thank you, Peter. A warm welcome also from my side. Being the last speaker, many things are mentioned, but let me stress some topics. The cooperation with the OECD and the collaboration with other regions around the world, we've seen it, and the work with the SDGs, all that has given us a new view on our region. For me, that is already an added value in itself, and it's a benefit regardless to the report. But of course, the report is also an excellent document for further work, especially in those places where the report doesn't not praise us only, but addresses challenges, and especially in the recommendations for actions in the last chapter. You may be surprised by this assessment, but by reading the report, I at first asked myself, is there a topic I'm not familiar with? Stefan mentioned it. My answer is no. We are working on all of these topics. We are active in all of the areas mentioned with projects, with measures and strategies, and we are trying to further develop the region in a positive way. This is a positive result because it shows that we are working on the right issues and now have a confirmation from outside. My assessment of the next steps is that we should continue along our way we have chosen. In my first opinion, this means that we should strive for permanent SDG monitoring that is visualized in an SDG dashboard. We should also make our knowledge available to all stakeholders in the region. We should also propose simple measures and projects to the municipalities and keep learning from each other. So I am personally sure, and after this report, it is evident that Rhine-Neckar is one of the most livable and innovative regions that must be preserved and constantly improved. We have been working on this for centuries, and now we want to do it in the future with the SDGs. Thank you very much for the great report, and once again, for the outstanding collaboration. Thank you for your attention, for the participation in this meeting. And now I hand the word over to Lorenz for the last words.
Yes, thank you so much. Very good to see also some steps forward and some ideas for the future of what could be done. Very insightful for us, for all of us in the room, I guess. And it's 12:30 sharp, so we have reached the end of today's webinar. So I first of all, of course, thank again all speakers who were here with us today, but also online, especially from Flanders, from Cordoba, but also my colleagues from Paris and connected around the world. I thank the local team for the continuous collaboration over the 2 years, especially Boris, Laura, and Kirsten, who cannot be here with us today. And then, of course, our OECD team. I mean, I'm the only one sitting here in person in Mannheim, but there's many people involved in our work. So I want to thank Stefano, who is coordinating this whole program, Aline, Josh, Mina for working with us on this project, and then I also wanted to thank Aziza and Sujin, who are the heads and acting heads of division. Of our division, who've been supporting us, of course, a lot in this work over the past 2 years. And then, as I mentioned before, this webinar has been recorded and will be shared online. And even though, unfortunately, we didn't manage to answer all the questions, we'll try to reach out to all of those who send us messages and questions in the Q&A and in the chat to actually answer those questions in the aftermath of this event. And then before I finally conclude this webinar, I all would like to invite you to join us for future events, especially on the 20th of April. You can already put in your calendars. We'll organize the 6th OECD Roundtable on Cities and Regions for the SDGs in Brussels, an event organized with the European Committee of the Regions, which will provide even further opportunity to exchange with other regions and cities from around the world, including the other pilots, but also the private sector, governments, civil society associations. So you're all welcome to join us then in April in Brussels, also online. And thank you very much, and have a good day, everybody.